President Zelensky's downgraded role in deciding the future of his own country was further undermined today. He's had to make do with a visit to Kyiv from President Trump's special envoy for Ukraine, retired General Keith Kellogg. President Zelensky didn't even get to brief reporters on it. The American negotiators cancelled a joint news conference. Later, Mr. Trump's national security advisor kept up his boss's attacks on the Ukrainian leader, accusing him of insulting Mr. Trump.
Good to see you. How are you?
Oh, to be a fly on the wall in these talks. Donald Trump's special envoy meeting with the Ukrainian leader, who appears to have piqued the president. What they discussed, we don't know, because the Americans cancelled the press conference in an ongoing display of disharmony between the two nations. We do know that President Trump has not backed down from his assault on Volodymyr Zelensky.
A dictator without elections. Zelensky better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. Got to move.
And warning about the risks of ongoing conflict.
There's no profit for anyone in having World War III, and you're not so far away from it. I'll tell you right now, you're not so far away.
On Air Force One, he continued to confound allies, speaking of his trust for Russia.
I think the Russians want to see the war end, and I really do. But I think they have the cards a little bit because, they've taken a lot of territory.
Ukraine would argue any Russian negotiating strength is down to concessions already made by the US, speaking without its consent during a week of criticism.
A lot of us are still in this stage of denial, of kind of accepting that the situation might be changing that drastically. But that does not take away our resolve to have a sovereign, independent state.
Any hope the vitriol may be easing was dispelled at a White House briefing this evening.
His frustration with President Zelensky is that you've heard is multifold. One, there needs to be a deep appreciation for what the American people, what the American taxpayer, what President Trump did in his first term, and what we've done since. So some of the rhetoric coming out of Kyiv, frankly, and insults to President Trump were unacceptable.
Honouring the dead who stood against Russian influence in 2014, President Zelensky did so, aware that he's now being cast as a dictator thwarting peace by the president of the nation that has, until now, been his great ally. Emma Murphy, News at 10.
Well, when the Prime Minister meets President Trump next week and they discuss Ukraine, defence spending will, of course, be one of their main talking points. The government has already said it's going up to 2.5% of GDP. The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, stood by the commitment today. As for where the money will come from, she told us there would have to be difficult choices, which could be code for spending cuts elsewhere.
This is the red key from House of the Dragon.
Yeah.
Rachel Reeves was visiting a film studios in Watford today, but the dramatic changes to European security norms are no movie plot. They are very real, and the Chancellor is beginning to change her script.
There could be British troops on the ground in Ukraine on some sort of peacekeeping mission in a matter of months, if not weeks. Do you accept that you have to go much further and faster on defence spending?
I am absolutely committed to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, as we set out in our manifesto. A strong economy depends on strong defences and our national security.
Before last year's election, Keir Starmer gave us the same promise on defence spending.
I've got the ambition that we should get to that 2.5% as resources allow.
But today there was no such caveat from the Chancellor about waiting for the economy to improve.
We recognise the increasing threats from countries like Russia to the whole of Europe, and we will work with our European allies to make sure that the money is available to keep Europe defended.
Next week, the Prime Minister will head to Washington, seeking security guarantees for Ukraine. In return, President Trump will likely ask about money.
What's the Prime Minister going to say when he meets with President Trump next week? Don't worry, Mr. President, we are going to increase defence spending, but you'll have to wait until the spring statement. I mean, that won't cut it with him.
Well, we have already increased defence spending under this government in the budget last year, and we made a commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence. The world has changed in the last few months, and we're committed to play our part in protecting our UK national security and also protecting the security of Europe too.
Are you willing to bend your fiscal rules in order to spend more on defence?
We will stick to our fiscal rules, but recognising the priority of defence spending in the world that we live in today means that we will have to make difficult choices so that we can spend that money that is needed to keep our country safe.
Spending more on defence involves spending less elsewhere.
Hello.
And those difficult choices mean big cuts in some government departments have just got more likely. Harry Horton, News at 10.